All right, Keith, first start off, spell your first and last name, give me your title and your law firm.
My name is Keith Taniguchi, Keith Taniguchi. And my name's Keith Taniguchi, and my law firm is Law Office of Keith Taniguchi.
So you specialize in family law, correct? Custody battles or no
I
other
do,
things?
I do family law, probates, and criminal law.
All right, so how long did you represent Joseph Ryan during his custody battle?
It was a couple of years.
A couple of years, okay. And this was back in Austin, Texas. I want to say around 2007 to 2009,
Yes.
that period. Okay. Just, tell me what you remember about that ongoing battle. What comes to mind now? It's been a long time now.
Well, I've been thinking about this since you called, and it really started out as a criminal case. It started out that he was accused of sexually abusing his daughter. And the genesis of that claim was that they claimed that Tylee had made an outcry about sexual abuse. And the county that's south of where I'm at, which is Travis County, Texas, that county is Hayes County, Texas. They became involved in this case and they brought out the full force. They brought out all their child abuse specialists, and they even went among, I mean, one of the claims, I believe, and I hate to be, too, what do you want to call it? Well, I'll tell you the truth. And the truth is that they said that he was doing all kinds of uh, abhorrent sexual contact with her. So, among other things, they went over there and took his bed and they cut the top off his bed and they took all the sheets and whatever he owned, and they took it over there to and had it inspected for DNA because they thought they were going to find his DNA and her DNA all over the bed or somewhere, and because they surprised him, that was, increased the chance that he couldn't go over there and somehow tamper with the evidence. And so they went off and they spent months over there looking at this mattress, and of course it came out nothing. And in the meantime, he went and took a polygraph test, and she was sent to a counseling, and I don't remember how she arrived with this counselor. This counselor was allegedly, and she's now deceased, was an expert on child abuse, and she had a partner that also claimed the same title, and so they went through this counseling, and Tylee kept, saying the same thing until one day Tylee recanted. And
And
so,
this is a 4-year-old Tylee, probably. This is a very young
yeah, and
girl.
I'm telling you that Tylee, at the time she made this outcry, she may have been younger. I mean, I was totally amazed how somebody could believe an outcry from a child that young. But be what it is, you can beat the rat, but you can't beat the ride. And so he had to follow the ride. So in the meantime, they went and denied him access to Tylee, except for through this counselor. So his ability to see Tylee became less and less and less, all with the, well, what's her name? Lori condoned all this activity. In fact, she encouraged it.
And speaking of that, so there was a therapist with Roxanne's house in San Marcos, Texas. I believe that's what I saw in the court
Yes.
documents. And the therapist said Tylee had not made an outcry to her about potential sexual abuse allegations against Joseph. The therapist at one point said the counseling became almost counterproductive, and she became concerned that Tylee had been pushed by Lori to make an outcry. Did Joseph know that this was a possibility? How did he react to that? You know, and I'm sure you believe that Lori was doing some coaching here.
Well, again, when I say the divorce happened in Travis County, which is where I'm at,
Hmm.
the claims came out of Hayes County, where Roxanne, she was the investigator on the case. And so that's how she became the investigator, because she happened to be working for the police department or law enforcement in Hayes County. And so that's, and all those people that that report you read was, was a part of that investigation. And yes, Tylee never, she didn't keep making the accusation, but she didn't recant it for some time. And at some point, she did recant it. I don't believe it was to that person; it was to Vivian.
Okay. But you know what? Was Joseph had to be very upset. I mean, he probably had to confide in you about, you know, why this was happening and why he believed
Knew
that
why.
they weren't true. Yeah. So tell me about that.
Well, Lori is. Uh, as I got to know her secondhand, I could tell that she exhibited some strange behavior. And I personally came to believe that there was something other than the truth motivating all this. And I believe I told you that this Mormonism that she has, and I'm not against Mormons or anything else, but she was a big believer in Mormonism. And I got to give you some context that when this was going on in 2007 in Travis County, or in Texas for that matter, out by Abilene, Texas, there was this sect, and it was called Warren Jeffs. And he was had this place that was a Mormon city kind of. They were building it from scratch, and they had created this minor city with multiple people, hundreds of people that migrated there and built this Mormon. Another just say like Salt Lake City. You read the story about Salt Lake City. A bunch of Mormons felt they were being prejudiced, so they all gathered and they went and created their own society someplace. Well, this place was a modern day version of that, and so I, knowing now that I was dealing with religion, and religion, when it starts interfering with law, gets rather scary. So I actually went out and purchased a number of books about Mormonism just to find out really what drives the religion. And I mean, I think I told you this during this investigative stage. I got a phone call from the second person in charge of the Mormon Church. No kidding, second person. uh, he calls me up and vouches for her authenticity. And I'm like flabbergasted. How do you get, it'd be like getting the Pope to call me, or the bishop under the Pope or whatever to call me about some disciple. And I was like, this is getting out of hand again.
This is during the custody battle. You got a call
Yeah.
from this person. Okay.
And,
And so as all this was going on, you know, what was it like? About a year, almost a year and a half of visitation issues for Joe. So he didn't get to see Tylee, right? There was a good amount of time. That was a big challenge.
well, then she goes to court and starts pushing this. We actually went to trial over a portion of this in a criminal trial about this, the allegations of all this, the sexual abuse. We had a jury trial and it came back not guilty.
And how close did Joseph ever get to getting full custody at all? Was there ever a chance of that happening? Any chance?
Well, yes, but yes and no. Joe didn't really have the wherewithal it, to do that, but he also was very like loved his daughter so much that he believed that Lori would take care of her, and he never expected that it would go where it did. And he was actually in favor of, it was okay that Tylee stayed with with Lori. But things gradually, slowly changed his mind. And as I believe at one point we found out that Tylee had this pancreatic or some kind of condition. And
She had pancreatitis. Yeah, she was at the Phoenix Children's Hospital, I believe.
well, that was happening here too. And Lori was feeding her nothing but processed food. And Joe was just getting more and more concerned because it was now a health issue. And so that was turning his attitude towards wanting to become the managing conservator. That's the one who makes all the decisions.
Mm-hmm. There was also an issue of overpayment of child support. I got some emails that were provided. An audit was done. Joseph said that he paid over $9,000 in child support, basically overpaid. And you were CC'd on this email. Can you talk about the financial challenges he had because of all of this happening?
Well, he was making pretty good money. So at first it wasn't a big deal. But she then at one point decided she's going to move off to Arizona. She was living in Texas, here in Austin, Texas. So that was like what you might call convenient. But when she went off to Arizona, expenses went up considerably. And it's our belief at the time she did it intentionally. And so we had to go to court again and try to stop this. And the courts in Austin, Texas, and Travis County, Texas, uh, sided with her because they didn't have any real evidence about any, you know, wrongdoing or badness, and she appeared like this great mother. She's good at that. And so
we've heard that, yes, the mother of the year image that people have admired her before, for
yes,
that sort of behavior. And
for instance, we have what they call a guardian ad litem, and that is a person that's appointed to represent the best interests of the child. And so we had one here in Travis County appointed to her, and she went all the way out to Phoenix, Arizona on Travis County money to go and inspect the house. And she came back with this glowing review, said Lori was, quote, perfect, and the house was all nice. I think they had a swimming pool, and it was just really fantastic. So we couldn't prevail on that issue. So when the Tylee ended up moving to Arizona, I think it's Chandler.
Yes.
And then, well, so Joe now had to do all his visitations and whatnot with the added expense of going through there, and his job was now becoming more tenuous. And he was running into now real problems out in Chandler. You must have some of that information, but if you go to the police department in Chandler, there's going to be multiple police reports about all the run-ins that they had. And she was on a full-fledged campaign to deny him access to Tylee. I mean, he would tell me in telephone calls about how he went to the Christmas play and he's supposed to be able to see her, and somehow, after he was supposed to have visitation with her after the play, and of course Lori grabs her and takes her away, and he never has his visitation. He had multiple of those experiences.
Yeah, there are multiple police reports between Chandler and Gilbert Police Department. So back to the audit in the email, turns out Lori said that Joseph actually owed $8,000 and told him that over the 6 years, it was his intention not to pay child support for Tylee, and saying that he was only hurting Tylee. It felt like a guilt trip. Yeah, I'm sure that you saw this. Was this the way that they interacted? Was this the way she spoke to him usually?
Who, Lori?
Lori to him, saying, this is your obligation, and it's sad that, you can't provide and pay this child support for your
That's a
daughter.
guilt trip. That's typical in this practice. They always, I mean, typically there is a legal solution. It's called an enforcement action. And you go over to court, you say you're not paying your child support, and then they'll go have a hearing and determine whether those allegations are true. And if not, they're going to either tell you if you don't pay this money by tomorrow or 90 days or some time limit that you're going to jail. But in the meantime, and this is now somewhat hearsay, her lawyer was becoming more and more disgruntled with her because she didn't pay anybody. And he tells me nowadays that she owed him $50,000 in attorney's fees. And this is because he was constantly haranguing on Joe as we have a term, Rambo lawyer. He was doing a good job.
Wow.
But now he says he's never been paid. And he tried to get off the case. He filed a motion to withdraw, and the court wouldn't let him off. So he ended up having to go to trial under a court order, and she was not paying him.
Never got paid.
His
So
name,
back,
his name
say it
is
again.
Don Hindera, and I'm sure he'll stand behind that. He became more and more disgruntled with her, and he has all kinds of opinions about him. Her.
I did see his name Hindera in the paperwork. Now, back in 2007, you tell me how you found out about the Taser attack, the stun gun used by Alex Cox.
Well, we were in this now. Well, I don't know if it was in the criminal, but I believe it was in the divorce case. I'm pretty certain it was that he was getting his visitations now, and they were supposed to be because of the claims of sexual abuse. He was getting what they call supervised visitation, and it's stepped. I mean, I was I actually was in bewilderment. He goes to jury trial. They say it doesn't happen, and he doesn't all of a sudden get his visitation. The courts intervene and they say, well, let's err on the side of caution. So they start this stair step thing that was like 1 hour every week, 2 hours after a couple of weeks, 3 hours, and slow. It's called stair step. And they also he couldn't do it. He had to be supervised. And so they have places in Austin where you can do supervised visitation. And so we had set up a certain time for him to go have his visitation at this supervised setting. And it was like immediately after the next day, say we're in court on Tuesday, and he was going to have his visit on Wednesday. Well, he goes over there and has his visitation and comes out, and Alex comes over to him as he's getting his car and sticks a stun gun on him. Okay. Now, how Alex would know about a visitation that just got announced the day before at a location that's not a normal location can only lead you to the conclusion that Lori told him. And I don't know, we ended up going, the state filed charges on Alex, and Joe went and testified against him, and they stuck him in jail, I believe, for a year at least. Maybe it was a 2-year sentence, and he got out early because good time, but he was convicted for aggravated assault.
Yeah, Alex entered the guilty plea. It took about a year, 2008, and did about 3 months. So he didn't do too much time in Travis County. But like you said, this location for the exchange or for the visitation, I guess you could say, it was a private location, only for the parties involved to know, right? So
yes.
Then Alex, I don't believe he was living in Austin, so he had to get some sort of communication to figure out where this was happening. This was the first supervised visit. Joseph hadn't seen Tylee for nearly a year and a half, but there was a statement, I don't know if you recall this, but Lori saying she had no idea how Alex got to Austin from Arizona, and how he even knew of a visit. Do you remember her kind of using that excuse?
Yes, I do remember that. That's impossible.
So you believe it's clear that Lori had to tell him where this visitation
Okay, so
happen.
I do kind of remember this fact pattern that you're talking about, the what was going on. And yes, he had to come here. And I do believe he went over to her house that night. He was at her house the night before that he went over there and attacked her, him.
Yeah.
Okay, so he comes in and he goes over to her house and then he's over there and stun guns him the next day.
And did this happen before he saw Tyler or after the attack?
After he saw Tyler.
He's going to his car and then it happens.
Yeah.
All right.
And then he
Um,
ended up in the emergency room at a hospital over there. And he was in the hospital for 3 days. And I mean, I'm just can't help but think, wonder whether his death was somehow, precipitated by being stuck with a stun gun sufficient enough to put you in the hospital for several days, emergency room.
yeah, I've never been tased, but at close range and being stunned multiple times, just what he was in a lot of pain, I'm sure. What was he telling you? I know it's been a long time, but how did he bring up his safety concerns even after, just kind of head on a swivel for Alex?
Well, Alex then got arrested, and so he was out of the picture. And we were assuming that prosecution, I mean, if he did it again, he wouldn't be in jail for 3 months or something. They'd put him away for 20 years. So that in itself was some kind of protection for Joe. He never did have any more problems with Alex, I don't believe. Not with now you've told me, I believe you said that there's been statements that he was trying to put a hit on Joe.
There are alleged statements, yeah, through a close friend of Lori Vallow that she said that she wanted a hit to be put on Joe, but the job could never get done. And then now we have this recording that we're going to get into, allegedly, of Lori saying that she wanted to murder him as well. That's there on audio. But let's go to 2018. Joseph died in April 2018. What do you remember about the last time you spoke to him or met with him? Just your interactions.
Well, I saw Joe. He came and stayed with me. And I think the date was around August because I left town in August of 2018. 18, yeah.
But he died April 2018, so it had to be what, the summer
17.
beforehand or
Yes.
17?
I went someplace on a trip and he stayed at my house. I know that.
Okay.
And his the way he got here was he called me up and he was telling me about well, he was didn't have a place to live here pretty soon. And he asked if he could come stay with me. And I said, well, for a little while, I mean, I'm not you're not my kid or anything. So, yeah, I understand desperation. So he loaded up he had a Jeep wagon, I mean, a Jeep, one of those large Jeeps. And he loaded it up and brought all of his possessions and moved to Austin for a while.
How long did he stay? Do you remember?
Months.
Months.
He had
So
three
he was
months.
trying to get on his feet. What was he having financial issues? Just trying to find a job. Just tell me, like, obviously he needed help.
Well, I'm seeing how he's passed. I mean, I'll be honest. He did have a drinking issue, and he didn't have that all this time that all this cases going on and all this other stuff. But he told me that out in Arizona, he got 3 DWIs, and so he was unemployable in some ways. And I mean, you asked earlier about how he was doing. Well, he had money. I mean, he financed all this stuff, all of that going back and forth, and so he was now not unemployable. And from there, well, to be, he went and lived with my brother for a couple of months too,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, I was kind of amazed at my brother's sympathy, but he had this garage apartment, and so Joe went over there to stay for a while. But then he eventually packed up and went to New York, is where I thought he went. He has a sister.
Hmm.
And so I believed that he was going to be in New York. But then when I found out he'd passed away, he'd moved back to Arizona, is what I believe the reports say. And that's what I've been hearing.
Yeah.
So he'd gone on this journey all the way to New York and then gone back to Arizona. And he still had visitation and by order, and I'm not sure he was even getting it then. I mean, he was very dedicated and very motivated to try to save Tylee.
Yeah. And Tylee had moved to Kauai for some time, maybe a couple of years almost. So they lost some time definitely because Lori left over
Well,
to go there. So when you found out about
let's
the
let's
death,
talk about Hawaii for a second. I
yeah,
just don't know what Hawaii has in her mind, but he was married to her on the beaches of Hawaii. It turns out that she got married to what's his name?
Chad Daybell,
Yeah,
November, yeah,
on
November
the beaches of
2019, yeah.
Hawaii. She has some kind of this attraction to being married on the beaches of Hawaii, and that's just another who knows what that means. But I mean,
He spent a
it,
lot of time there,
yes.
yeah. And
Well,
so
okay. Well, let's look at it this way. If you're out in Hawaii, how can anybody come and visit your kids and stuff? If you want to keep them away for whatever reason, whether it's just I don't think it was for the best intentions, but that's speculation. Hawaii is a good place to go do that.
what's your reaction though to this Phoenix police looking back at Joe's case, his death investigation more than 2 years later?
Well, okay, so unfortunately, Alex has met his demise too, and it's all in this circle. This is sort of the craziness of it all. Joe, in my opinion, was depressed. Okay, I could see him looking back over his history and seeing how it led him to go become, drink too much and all that other stuff, and then he goes off to New York and it's not successful there. He ends up back in Phoenix and he's probably doesn't, I'm not sure what his economic status was there, but he's probably doesn't have any money and he's depressed. I mean, I would tell you, he must have been super depressed by this point.
When you saw him, was he, would you say, when he stayed with you and your brother?
Yes, I would say in general, he was, I mean, yes, I'll say yes. And, and I think that the stun gun affected his heart. I really believe that. And I believe he died of a heart attack. And there could be some relationship between that injury. I mean, he was in the emergency room for 3 days, and the guy gets convicted for doing that to him, Alex. And we were talking about Alex. Well, what's the explanation there? Here's Alex over here, and they've all got guns. I mean, this is just this violence is in this case everywhere. I mean, well, look at the outcome. When we've got Tylee and Colby, I think that they're looking at intentional conduct causing their demise, their passing. And I'm not sure if anybody's figured out. I've not seen any forensics on that.
Yeah, we don't have forensics on Tylee and JJ's deaths and how that happened in Rexburg, Idaho. But besides them, how they were found and
Right.
the gruesomeness of it all. Um, when you hear that Lori allegedly said she wanted to kill Joseph, wanted to have him murdered somehow, this on a recording that just surfaced, are you shocked she would go out and say that publicly to people like that?
Well, no, as I said, I think she had Alex go over there and stick the stun gun on him. I mean, why would he, I mean, uncle, or what, I think he would be an uncle. Why would an uncle do all that?
But for her to say it to people like that in a public setting,
Well, that goes back to her ideas about religion have now become non-mainstream. The Mormonism that I read about is not what she thinks. She's got some hybrid belief about Mormonism that is crazy, and that's a sign that maybe she's mentally imbalanced. I don't think she's insane. I think she's mentally imbalanced. I mean, and mentally imbalanced in my profession. I mean, I've been doing this for 40 years. That's an invitation to do all kinds of illegal activity.
so could she have anything to do with this death at all? I mean, he's been cremated. I don't know what they look at when they review the case. And you did mention that maybe the stun
Well,
gun attack had something to do with it, but she said in the police report they had not spoke. Her and Joe hadn't spoke for 2 years or so. When this happened, when he died.
well, go get those police reports I mentioned earlier, and the visitation and those are within 2 years. I actually believe that happened within the 2 years of his death. They might be a little bit longer, but he was in the same area that she was, from traveling from New York back to Arizona, and he did have legal visitation. So I can't imagine how he didn't attempt to contact her. Uh, he was he did use email and texting. I'm not sure if they could get those records, but that would certainly be interesting to know, who he was texting and who he was emailing in that period of time. I mean, it's not that long. I mean, you could do a search on it. If you had her email account, you could certainly figure out if he tried to contact her and if there's any response. I don't think that, if you want to get technical, I don't think he would have talked to her.
Hmm. He definitely had some sort of contact, whether it was email or phone, unless she changed her phone number at some point, but or maybe she just ignored or didn't answer to say that she had not spoke to him for 2 years. But I also want to know how much from your, you didn't just get to know him as a client, but like, for you to help him out and have him stay over, I mean, more of a friend. How much did Tylee mean to Joseph, from what you saw?
Everything. He didn't have any other children, and you have to remember, Joe was grew up as an orphan. He didn't have a family. I mean, he has a sister apparently, but I believe she may have been an adopted also. So the only family he had was Tylee.
So when it's all said and done, do you think his biggest heartbreak in his life was just not being able to raise her at all, losing all that time that really was a big weight on him all his life?
Absolutely. And she put an obstacle on every step of the road.
For him just to even see her.
Yes.
Yeah. And when you look
I
at
mean,
everything that has transpired now, Lori's last ex-husband, Charles, killed by Alex, who claimed self-defense. Then she takes the kids, JJ and Tylee, to Rexburg, marries Chad Daybell just weeks after Chad's first wife suddenly dies.
right.
Then the kids are killed. Then they're off in Hawaii, on a honeymoon. They don't cooperate with law enforcement. Then the kids' bodies are found on Daybell's property, buried. When you were finding out all this as this was national news, did you do a double take at first when it was all coming out? Like, hey, is that the same person that you were in court with? It's like, what was your reaction? It's like this was a huge story, and it still is.
I knew immediately that was her. And she was acting exactly like, it didn't surprise me one bit.
Not one bit. I mean, but the circumstances, and these are
I mean, remember sticking
the
a stun gun to somebody's heart? That was just minor, but it created, like I said, people who have got psychological issues, that's just the first step. She just got away with it and did more. I mean, in her mind, this is probably some kind of justified reaction.
But somehow her hands physically aren't in anything. It seems like she's always connected. She knows the people that are involved, but she doesn't have her hands on the stun gun, or she hasn't been charged with murder. It's interesting how her hands never appear to be dirty in anything criminal. But I guess that's a topic that, law enforcement will have to figure out and dig into.
They have the law of agency, and agents do work for other people. And so you got the crime boss who gets the hitman, and the hitman goes out there and kills the snitch or whoever. Well, the crime boss is the one who told them to. And Lori's the crime boss.
She has those
She has that power.
intangibles.
Look, Daybell is at her beck and call. She had lots of these guys. She is a manipulator, a master manipulator, and it's because she was actually everything I can see, she is a very good-looking woman, and she uses that looks to. It's like a Venus flytrap. You get these people in there, and they do what she wants.
That's an interesting point. You talk about manipulation, and I want you to go back to the mannerisms that you witnessed in the court hearings for the custody of Tylee. What did you see in the courtroom then, and like what you see now in 2020 of Lori most recently? How do you describe how she acts? How does she handle people, her body language, things like that?
What I just said, I saw her in action. She's a hairdresser by trade. So she can dress up. She can look good. And she's blessed with good looks.
And that's but intellectually, when you would talk to her face to face or you would question her, was there a challenge or no? What would you say about how she would interact?
I never had any question that she was mentally challenged in any way. She had full faculties. It doesn't take much to break the law. You don't have to be a mob boss to run a couple of people, especially, I guess, if you've got I hate to say this, but if you're providing sex, the mob boss isn't providing sex. She could. She was a master. She was a master manipulator.
I've heard this many times.
She has a whole plate of weapons, and she uses them.
So, in your 40 years of doing this profession, doing family law, so you've seen so many custody battles. You've seen some ugly battles, I'm assuming. Well, what about this one? I don't know if you keep a ranking, but just how are you going to remember this one? The Ryan Vallow battle into what we see.
3, maybe it's the top. I think it really was. I have never gone and read books, not law books. I'm talking about books about religion.
Because you needed to understand what was going on. That's why you had to do that. So this took a lot out of you.
Oh, yes. You don't know. Lawyers are known to go and do the background. And yes, I was looking at the background, but one book wasn't enough. And then I got kind of really interested in how different the Mormon faith is than regular Christianity. They're all claim to be Christians, and then they appear to be, but their branch with the celestial part, that's not Christianity. The celestial part is definitely the Mormons, and I don't disrespect that, but hers, now we look at what Daybell's doing, and it's one step beyond. I'm just not what I was reading. It sounds even sorry. More out there. I don't want to use the word.
And then the violence, and then these sexual abuse allegations. I mean, this case definitely had just a lot going on, and a lot of drama for everyone.
It's
It's
when you put a kid up to lie about your father, that's not good. I mean, I could poor Tylee growing up with that kind of starting from second year of your life, and you've been now and being part of a conspiracy to deprive him of visitation with her, and it's just tragic. And she'd had no problems doing that. I've had other cases when they were using that same technique, and it's sad that every time they come up, Tylee was younger than most, 2 years old. It's Yeah, I'd say it was probably the worst case I've seen of real abuse. Not physical abuse. This is totally mental abuse, using other people abuse. I mean, you've got lots of cases where they go beat each other up all the time, and they get drunk and slug it out and push each other and all that. And that's kind of like the standard like family violence case. This is a family violence case, but it's all mental.
This was just mental destruction of Joseph,
Yep.
what he took, what he had to go through,
Yep.
and never any evidence that was found in court.
Well, that's
I mean,
the court like to see. Hey, he stole the money. This is more subjective.
You said the mattress was checked and nothing.
Yes.
Nothing.
Nothing.
No DNA.
They never found any of that. Now, I'm going to guarantee you they tried hard. They wanted to believe he was a sexual predator. That see, you put a little child out there and the child says this happened, they want to believe that bigger than anything. And so this is the manipulation. And they went down. When you go over there and go and DNA test a whole mattress, I mean, usually you take the underwear or something.
Yeah. Anything else? Was anything else done, or was that the main thing? The mattress.
Well, no, all the sheets.
Sheets. Okay.
That was they couldn't. There's really nothing else you could go. In my opinion, excuse me, there's nothing else that would have had that type of evidence they're looking for. I've had cases that they actually, you can believe it, photograph their, they take their cell phone out, they're photographing their illegality. Now, that would have been good, but there's no video of anything.
This was back in 2000. Yeah, the 2000s. I mean, there was technologies, they just phones, but not like now. But okay, so, but Joe had to feel vindicated then.
No, well, yes, he was vindicated. It wasn't that kind of vindication where you're, pumping like Rocky.
Yeah.
It's much more subtle. And even when he won, he didn't really come out the clear victor. I saw when he wins, they say, well, we're going to give you this step thing, and you're going to go pay all these professionals and go get, psychological exams, even when they found he didn't do it. I mean, that's not a victory.
Yeah. He just wanted the normal custody with his daughter.
Yeah. The system failed him in some ways too.
No.
Because the evidence now was in the other side, but it didn't seem like he was getting the other side results that he should have. It's that, as I told you, that's an err on the side of caution. I said, well, what do you need in order to get out from under that rope? I mean, I don't know what other decision could have been made so that he didn't have to go through all that.
It's a very sad situation. Okay.
I thought he did well in spite of it all. I mean, he did keep his chin up.
Hey, Keith, thank you so much for your time. You answered all my questions, and it's a case that goes far back, so your memory hasn't failed you. Too bad. So I appreciate it.
It's getting close, but anyway.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
You too.